Thank you very much.
Call Darian Fenton.
Mr Speaker. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to have a call on the budget 2012, and I think there's one thing we do agree with the government on, which is that governments are about choices and priorities. This side just thinks they've got their choices and priorities all wrong. Labor's view is that the budget is about people, rather than people being about the budget. You know, that that side of the House thinks that the people serve the economy, not the other way around. Budgets are where the rubber hits the road, and this government has got it so wrong. Its priorities are wrong, and it shows. The worst growth in 50 years, the worst growth in 50 years, more than 50,000 New Zealanders who've left our shores, a 52% increase in unemployment, and nearly more than 50,000 people on benefits under this government. They've only been in power three years and a bit, and what a track record. John Key has consistently overpromised and underdelivered. This year's no exception. Last year he promised 170,000 jobs. Now where are they? Where are the jobs? This year the estimate's gone down. It's been cut by 16,000, and we're still waiting to see the jobs from last year. Last year he promised 4% growth. What's happened to that? Now that's now 2.6% projection. He said exports were rising. The latest statistics show that exports fell almost 800 million, or 17% in the last year. And last year he promised real growth in wages. This year we see it peak at just 1.6% and declining. One of the most disappointing things about this budget, Mr Speaker, is the lack of focus on jobs and wages. The government's recipe is to tinker and hope, and it does, and it's all going to come right in the end. It reminds me of Mr Micawber. Remember him? Mr Micawber from David Copperfield, who was famous for saying, "Something will turn up." Let's remember that Mr Micawber spent quite a lot of time in debtor's prison, actually, and perhaps the government should think about that too. And let's talk about jobs, because the other side, the government's been talking about jobs, or the last speaker certainly. The jobs from Australia. Now let's be honest about why those jobs are coming from Australia. They're coming from Australia because we've got a low-wage economy. They're coming from Australia because Mr English thinks low wages are a competitive advantage. Let's talk about the Hobbit jobs. 400 jobs at Weta Digital are coming from overseas. Now, how is that helping New Zealand? 400 jobs, high-skilled, high-tech jobs, and of course we won't have the teachers and the intermediate to even get those kids at home. And even the New Zealand Ballet is now looking to bring people from overseas. For goodness sake, what about jobs? This is the truth about this government's job recipe. And the truth is, as we all know, people are just giving up because this is a no-hope budget and they're heading overseas and turning paper boys and girls upside down to get the money out of their pockets, and robbing the pockets of older people for small change are the best ideas they've been able to come with. And this zero budget will do nothing for low and middle income earners and their families. On the things that matter, that will really make a difference to those people. Things like growth in the economy, jobs, incomes and exports. This budget offers nothing. The only idea this government has is asset sales, and we all know how that's going down in the community. A big fat blur. So, you know, the tragedy about this, though, the tragedy is that there is playing out in almost every family in New Zealand. It is people realising there's no hope under this national government. Over the weekend, there was a new baby born in my family. He was born to my nephew, which is something to celebrate. But, Mr Speaker, this is a child I'll probably never see. He was born in Vienna. He will be an Austrian citizen. The next generation of my family now live in Australia, in Geneva, in San Francisco. And I can't tell you how sad that makes me as a proud New Zealander, knowing there are some of our family who will just not come home while we have this kind of budget and this kind of no-hope budget. And the government has made choices that make things worse. Let's talk about the tax cuts they gave to the rich. They haven't apologised for that. It's put the country in a bind, and they should apologise for that, because following that, they hit lower-income families with a rise in GST. They've increased, and the paper boys, and they've increased the minimum wage by paltry amounts. And they keep going back to failed ideas. And we've heard some of the government members today say, Labor had the cheek to oppose the 90-day trial period. I heard the Minister of Labour sort of shrieking her way through the speech, making outrageous claims that nobody can substantiate about how the 90-day trial period has created all these jobs. Is that the best the government can do? No, actually it's not, because they don't understand how you get better wages and productivity and decent work in this country. It's a narrow vision, and what we're going to see is more of it. That's what we're going to see, more employment law changes ahead, particularly around collective bargaining, and that is the one thing standing between raw managerial power and respect and fair treatment for workers. It will undermine collective bargaining. It's another thing that helps lift wages across the board, protect job conditions for all workers and reduce inequality. I'd like the Minister to front up to those West Home workers that our very brave Human Rights Commissioner talked about on the weekend. I'd really like her to do that and tell her why they should be worse off because she's going to make changes to the labour law. Tell it to the cleaners who gathered last week to launch the Living Wage campaign, along with 50 community organisations, including faith-based organisations, who reminded us that we have a moral duty in this country to love thy neighbour, to look out for one another. But this government doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. And what did Don Key say? Oh, he doesn't understand what a living wage is. I'm really looking forward to hearing what happens to the Minister of Labour when she goes off to the International Labour Organisation conference next week, where they're actually going to be talking about fundamental principles and rights at work, like collective bargaining, like freedom of association. I think she can expect it pasting, and she deserves it. And in fact, all of the ideas, all of the things that she has put forward in the paper that the Cabinet has signed off have been criticised by the Labour Department, and they've been criticised by the International Labour Organisation. We will be a pariah in the international community after 10 years of being a leader and being able to hold our heads high about the way we treat workers. The one thing I will support in this budget, Mr Speaker, is the increase in health and safety, even though we know it's being reprioritised from other areas. It's not new money. But I'd also add to that and say it's not going to solve the problem, because the government doesn't believe in worker involvement in health and safety. They don't believe workers are intelligent or trustworthy enough to be able to contribute their ideas about their own health and safety and how improvements can be made. So Kate Wilkinson puts all of her confidence and money into a CEO forum, again, you know, where the bosses are essentially deciding what's good for workers. She's let the Pike River families down. Well, in fact, John Key's let them down with the cut in the budget on that. She's cut the role of workers in health and safety. They've made workplaces unsafer with the 90-day trial period. And if you don't believe me, sorry, Mr Speaker, if those members don't believe me, go and talk to a young worker in a workplace on a 90-day trial and ask them how safe they feel raising a health and safety issue. So the government can cry crocodile tears about health and safety, but they have no idea about what this means. Bit by bit, Mr Speaker, this government plans to gut our employment relations framework, so the protections that workers in New Zealand have will be gone. This is a zero ideas budget. It's short-sighted, it's petty, it's nasty, and worst of all, it's going to mean we see more of our children crossing the ditch and heading overseas.
Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This budget is a sensible one. It takes a firm line on spending.